I've investigated countless serial killers, but none like this one. Here's my story. The buzz of my county-issued radio crackled through the quiet hum of my truck's AC. The sun, not yet the 9th hour, already pressed down on Luna County. Unit 12 to dispatch. What have you got, Sandy? I said into the mic. Mac, got a call? It's a strange one. A hiker out by the Crimson Spires reported a body. Said it's, well, you'll need to see it. Near Coyote Jaw Arch. A muscle moved in my jaw. Coyote Jaw Arch was no place for a man on foot for pleasure. It lay an hour or more from the last dirt road, where it rutted out into the wilderness, set deep within the broken land of ravines and stone mesas that spread eastward from the town. Young Deputy Miller is on his way. Sounded a bit green on the line. Sandy said, Figures. Tell him to secure the scene, not touch anything, and wait for me. I said, Will do, Mac. And, be careful. The hiker sounded spooked. Really spooked. Sandy said finally, I made a sound and put the microphone on its hook. Spooked out here could mean the sun is in a man's head making pictures in the air, or it could mean something else. The truck clawed its way over the last miles, the transmission in low range, the tires throwing up skirts of dust and gravel as I worked it through ruts deep enough to take a lesser vehicle down to its axles. Then the ground rose too steep and too broken for the truck, and I stopped in the thin shadow of a Palo Verde. I took my pack, the canteens, my sidearm, the camera, and the evidence kit. The walk-in was like walking into a furnace. The air above the red rock trembled in the heat, and the only sound was the crush of my boots on the baked soil and then the angry buzz of a horsefly that circled in the still air. When I saw Miller's County vehicle parked near the edge of a dry wash where the earth fell away, sweat had soaked my shirt to my skin. He stood at the lip of a small canyon, looking into it, his shoulders drawn up. Miller. I greeted, my voice a little raspy. What's the situation? He turned, and I saw the relief on his young face. He was perhaps 23. Detective Cole. Sir, thank God you're here. He swallowed and made a motion with one hand that trembled. Down there, at the foot of that pillar. I looked where he pointed. 40 feet below us. The scree sloped down to the floor of the small canyon. A single shaft of stone stood there, a hoodoo, its form like a long finger of rock worn thin by wind and time. And at the foot of it, in the shadows that lay mottled on the ground, there was something. Even from that high ground, I saw that it was wrong. I raised the binoculars to my eyes and brought the scene into focus. My breath froze. It was not at the foot of the stone pillar. It was on the pillar, or it seemed to be, as if it grew from the rock itself some 10 feet from the ground where a narrow shelf of stone jutted out, a shelf no wider than a man's 2 feet, set side by side. The body, a man by the width of the shoulders, was seated upright, yet it was not the posture of a man seated, but a thing made rigid. The limbs were set wrong. One arm stretched out from the body, the bones of the fingers showing as if they pointed to the west where the sun would fall. The other arm was bent and laid in the lap as if in a poor imitation of rest. The skin of the man was of dark leather, stretched tight upon the bones beneath. It looked like he had cured in that relentless heat for weeks. I went down the slope, the broken rocks sliding under my boots, and Miller followed, his movements clumsy on the uncertain grade. The air down in the cut was thick. It smelled of dust and hot rock, and another smell beneath that, a dry and pungent smell with a sharper note to it, an acrid bite that I could not name. There was no smell of the body's decay, and that was another thing that was wrong. When I came closer, I saw the terrible craft of it. The arm that pointed was not bare skin and bone alone. Segments of choya, barbed and vicious, had been woven into the flesh of it, through the flesh of it, so that the cactus formed a kind of armor over the bones. Where the muscle had drawn away from the arm, polished stones from a riverbed had been pushed into the hollow's milky quartz and agate that was banded, and they glowed softly in the shadow. They were wedged between the bones and the dried sinew, as if whoever did this thing meant to replace what the desert itself would have taken in its own time. The head of the man was canted to one side. The face, what I could see of it, was hidden by a mask. Not a mask a man might buy. It was made of clay, the color of the earth, and it was dried and cracked by the sun. 2 small holes for eyes, a line for a mouth. A crude thing. It made the man beneath it not a man. A thin line of black ants moved in their fashion across the clay of the mask and down the line of the throat to disappear into the collar of the man's shirt. Miller spoke then, voice shaky. "Sir, who do you think would do this?" I looked at him, but I showed him nothing of what I felt. This was an artist. I looked at the man there on the rock, at the terrible care of it, a very sick one. There was only the sound of the ants as they moved on the clay and the sound of the hot wind as it sighed through the rock passages of the canyon. Whoever had made this thing knew the desert, and he had taken its stark soul and made of it a stage for this. I took the camera from my pack. Documenting this would take time. It would be a long and evil labor, and I knew with a certainty colder than a desert night that this would not be the last of his work. The dead man from Coyote Jaw Arch lay under the white lights of the county morgue. Dental records gave him a name, Thomas Ashton, 45 years of age, from Tucson. He had been missing 3 days when a bird watcher came to the desert. Dr. Ramirez worked over him through the afternoon. She was a woman of calm demeanor, acquainted with the desert's tally of heat and thirst and broken bones from falls. But Ashton was of a different ledger. I stood in that room with her, and mostly I listened. The office moved with a quiet purpose that did not speak of the tremor that Ashton, his body arranged like some grim sentinel, had sent through our small number. Young Miller had been sent home. He had said little after we left the arch, that he was scarred by what he had seen there. "The desiccation," Ramirez said, peeling off her gloves, her voice tired but precise. "It's accelerated, beyond anything natural. We're talking about something that should take weeks, months even, condensed into maybe 72 hours, tops." She pointed to a magnified image on her screen, showing skin cells. "There's evidence of a chemical agent, some kind of aggressive desiccant, almost a tanning solution, but cruder. Sprayed on, I think, post-mortem." "So he was killed," I said, "then placed, then this treatment." "Precisely. The cause of death for Ashton appears to be blunt force trauma to the back of the head. Quick, almost merciful, considering what came after." She shook her head. "The cholla insertions are deliberate, almost surgical in their placement despite the brutality. No defensive wound suggesting he was awake for that part. Thank God. The clay mask formed directly on his face. The ants. Mac, those ants were from a specific harvester colony I've only seen a few miles from the arch, near the old cinder cone. They don't naturally congregate like that. They were introduced." "Someone is bringing tools to his work," I said. I felt a coolness on my own skin. Someone strong, with knowledge of the terrain and an unnerving amount of patience, and specific natural resources. I said, finally, the days that followed, I looked through old reports of men gone missing. I read the small words written on the internet by people who lived in this county, looking for talk of strange camps, of men who kept to themselves in the wild places. I spoke to the rangers of the parks, the men from the government lands, and the old ranchers whose land stretched out for 50 miles around Coyote Jaw Arch. No one had seen such a thing, or no one would say if they had. Thomas Ashton was a man with no apparent enemies, no strange ways about him save that he had come to this place to watch birds and had met this end. The pressure from the county sheriff, a good man, but worried about tourist season and bad press, was mounting. Find something, Mac. Anything. People are scared. I was finding things, but they were only more questions. The digital trace of Ashton's life led nowhere. The hiker who found him was only a man who liked to walk in the open country, and now wished he had not. I thought again and again of the craft of it, the terrible order in that display. It was not the work of rage. It was a thing of obsession. A message. But for whom was it meant? The cholla, the polished stones like jewels in the dead flesh, the lines of ants moving on their dark errands. These things began to inhabit my sleep. I would wake in the dark of my own room with the image of Ashton's clay face before my eyes, and I could feel the dry rasp of the desert in my own throat. It was late on the third day since we brought Ashton down from the rock. The sun was a smear of orange and purple at the western rim of the world when Sandy's voice came over the radio. It was not sharp this time. It was low and held tight, and there was a shading in it that was near to dread. Mac, are you out there? I was following a half-baked theory about old mining claims near the cinder cone, where Ramirez had mentioned the unique ants. My truck was parked near a collapsed adit, the air cooling rapidly as night approached. Go ahead, Sandy. We got a call from Old Man Henderson. You know him, lives out past the Ghost Rock Flats. I knew him, a man who lived apart from the world, who came to town 2 times a year for what he needed. He called no one. What does he want? I said. He says, Sandy's voice was quieter now. He says his scarecrow started moving. There was a silence then. His scarecrow? I said, that is what he said, Mac. He kept saying it. He said it is out in his west paddock, near the dry well. He said it is different now. He sounded terrified. He will not go near it. He will not look at it again. He just wants us to come. A coldness settled in my belly. Ghost Rock Flats was 30 miles more bad road, leading out to where the land was empty, but different. Scarecrow. My mind saw Thomas Ashton on his pillar of stone, made into something not human. Tell Henderson to lock his doors, I said, and to stay inside. I am on my way. Is there anyone with him? I said, negative. He live alone. Understood, I said. No more radio unless it's urgent. Miller is off his shift. I will take this. I knew there was a risk in it. But if this was what I thought it was, bringing in a deputy, even a season 1, might just complicate things. This artist, he might enjoy a witness, but perhaps not a crowd. The drive was more than an hour. The darkness had taken full possession of the desert when I reached the edge of Henderson's land, a fence of barbed wire that sagged between its posts. The only light was a sweep of my truck's headlamps across the waste. His cabin was a small dark shape, a single point of fear in that great emptiness. I cut the engine and the lights, and I listened. There was nothing, only the crickets sawing in the scrub and the small sound of the wind moving through the salt bush. I took my heavy flashlight from the seat and my sidearm, and I walked toward the cabin. Mr. Henderson, I called out, my voice low. Sheriff's Department. Detective Cole. A voice came from behind a window boarded over with old wood. It shook. You come alone? Yes, sir, I said. Just me. Are you all right? The thing, he said, in the west paddock. You got to see it. All right, Mr. Henderson. You stay inside. I am going to look. Just show me the way. A hand, palsied and thin, came through a crack in the boards. It pointed to the west. Out past the old tractor, he said. Near the bones. Bones. I nodded, though he could not see it in the dark. Stay put, I said. The west paddock was a flat place of cracked earth. The skeletons of what might have been Joshua trees stood like markers. My flashlight cut a white path through the darkness. I saw the shape of an old tractor, its iron body rusted and canted to one side. And beyond it, at first it looked only, as he said, a scarecrow made ragged by the weather, a tall frame of sticks, with torn clothes that flapped in the night wind. But as I came closer, the beam of my light, settling on it, the true shape of it began to show itself, and the air I drew into my lungs felt like ice. It was not just different. This scarecrow was not made of straw, an old cloth stuffed onto a wooden cross. The frame was wood, yes, but it was not a simple cross. It was made more intricate, like an effigy to some dark god, and lashed to this frame with strands of rusty baling wire that caught the light from my lamp was a human form. A woman. She was smaller than Ashton, her bones more delicate, but she was as desiccated as he, her skin drawn tight and thin like old parchment over the frame of her. Her arms were not outstretched in the common way of scarecrows. They were bent and twisted upwards. The thin fingers of her hands spread wide against the great dark vault of the sky with its uncounted stars, as if she were frozen, some last silent plea to a deaf heaven. Her clothes were a dress of faded flowers, torn and arranged upon her with a kind of awful artistry. But where the head of a scarecrow would be a sack of cloth, her head was bare. It was tilted back, her mouth open as if in a scream that had been caught and mummified in her throat. And the things that had been added to her. My God, the things, wisps of dried tumbleweed, gray and brittle, had been woven into her hair, so that it formed a wild corona about her head, like the snakes of Medusa. In the hollows of her eyes there was no clay. There were round, flat pieces of turquoise, set carefully into the sockets. Her lips, drawn back from gums that were dry and hard, were stained a deep and unnatural red, a color that might have come from crushed berries or from some powdered stone. But the worst of it, the thing that made my stomach tighten in a cold knot and the hairs on my arms rise up, was what lay arranged around her on the ground. The bones Henderson had spoken of, skulls, the small skulls of desert animals, coyotes and jackrabbits, birds, even the skull of a gopher. There were dozens of them. They had been laid out in a perfect spiral on the cracked earth around the foot of the effigy, a spiral that tightened as it reached her bare, mummified feet. Each skull was turned to face her, looking inward, as if they were a silent congregation of skeletons come to worship at her altar. I took a step back. The beam of my flashlight wavered. This was not just murder. This was not what he had made of Ashton. This was a ritual. This was a form of worship. And a new horror took root in my chest. This woman, she could not have been here for more than a day. Perhaps two. He was working faster now. He was growing bolder. His theater was becoming more grand. I swept the beam of my light around the silent paddock. The wind sighed. It carried the faint, dry scent of creosote and sage. And beneath it, that other scent, faint and acrid, that I had known before. He could be out there in the darkness, watching me, waiting to see what I would make of his new work. My hand went to the butt of the Sig Sauer at my hip. The silence of the desert was no longer a peaceful thing. It was a silence that waited, and I was standing in the middle of his gallery. The beam of my light held the woman in Henderson's west paddock. I keyed the radio. "Sandy, it's Mac." Her voice came back quickly and with a wire in it. "Mac?" He said, "You found it." "Henderson, he will not be still." "Yeah, I found it." "Sandy, listen carefully. I need a full team out here at dawn. Forensics, backup, the me. Until then, I need you to tell Mr. Henderson to stay locked inside and not come out for any reason. And patch me through to Sheriff Brody, his home line. Wake him if you have to." "Copy that, Mac." "On it," she said. I brought the truck closer and set the work lights to throw their hard glare upon that place, but I kept them off the ground. I photographed the woman from all quarters. My breath smoked in the cooling air. The carrot was a thing to see up close. The wire turned with a knot he'd used before, a specific and looping tie. The woman was younger than the man at Coyote Jaw. Late 20s, perhaps. No name for her yet. The sun and whatever chemicals he had used had drawn the flesh tight to bone, so that she was a thing of leather and wood and wire. The tumbleweed was woven through her dark hair, so it stood out like horns touched by a mad wind, a cruel halo against the black sky. And in her eyes he had set polished stones, round and flat, the color of the deep sky at noon, and they caught the light, high-grade turquoise. Brody's voice when Sandy patched me to his house was thick with sleep, but it cleared. "Another one, Mac? As bad as the first?" "Worse, Sheriff. Different, more performative. This one feels like it's addressed to someone." The dawn came up gray and pitiless on that country, and with it came the cars of the county. The forensics men moved quietly about their work, their voices low in the face of it. Dr. Ramirez wore a face like a stone carving as she began her preliminary on-site examination. Old Henderson was led from his house, and he would not turn his eyes to the west field. I looked again at the skulls set about her feet. Clean bones, sun-bleached, each one facing the woman on her strange crucifix. Dr. Ramirez spoke beside me, her voice low as she examined the stones in the woman's eyes. "Notice anything odd about the materials, Mac?" Ramirez asked as she gently probed one of the turquoise eye coverings with gloved finger. "This turquoise isn't the cheap stuff you find in roadside souvenir shops. This is old mine quality. Specific veins. Bisbee blue maybe, or Sleeping Beauty, though that's rare this far south." My mind started to click. The Bisbee and Sleeping Beauty mines were hundreds of miles away, too far for casual acquisition by a desert loner. Anything local that would match? Ramirez shrugged. Most of the old claims around here played out decades ago. They were small operations. But there are stories. Some of the really remote box canyons up in the Diablo Range, near the Twisted Sisters peaks. Local prospectors swore there were untouched veins of gem-grade turquoise up there. Hard to get to. Treacherous terrain. The Diablo Range. Twisted Sisters. I knew the area. A broken country of canyons that cut deep in ridges like the bones of some old dead beast. Self-service did not reach there. No help comes there for a man who finds himself lost. And the small owl whose skull lay among the others, Ramirez said its kind nested in those high canyons. Nowhere else in this county. Over the next 24 hours, we canvassed known turquoise claims and rockhound haunts. But the Diablo Range theory solidified. The type of animal skulls also began to create a more refined geographical profile when cross-referenced with specific habitats. A particular. Click the next video for part 2.